to be started, John?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Welcome to this meeting of Children and Learning. As this will be our last meeting, which I said at the last meeting, I would just reiterate that I'd like to take this opportunity to thank directors and staff members of Children and Learning Committee for all their input over the last term of this council. Now, are there any apologies of absence?
Yes, Vice Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Sturrock with Councillor Stewart substituting. Also an apology from Mrs Anna Cheen.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest?
No hands, Vice Convener.
Okay. Well, today it's the recommendations are in front of you. They're all for noting and discussing. I can go down each individual one, or we agree on the recommendations. Do you want me to go down one by one, or we agree that Councillor Devine?
Yeah, I would just like some clarification on a couple of points, Vice Convener. I don't know if it's from you or from Mrs McIntosh.
I think it'll be Mrs McIntosh.
It was on page 5 on item 2, the cessation of fruit in our primary schools. I was just wondering what the rationale behind that was, and also could I have a bit of information about the storage of Asn Materials? I don't know what you're talking about there, so that would be helpful. And on item 5, I was really quite concerned. I should have known this probably, but our SPSAs are paid under the Scottish average, and that concerns me. You know, most of them are women. We're living in Angus, which is a low-paid area of Scotland, and I would have thought we would be trying to raise that bar. So I would like to have some information about that too.
Councillor
Vice Convener. Thank you.
Well, yeah, and then I see you. Okay, Kelly, if you take that one on, wonderful.
Councillor Devine, thank you for raising these points. In relation to free fruit, as members will know, we currently have free fruit in our primary schools for all children. This happens 3 times a week in the majority of our schools and 5 days a week in 3 of our schools. Those 3 schools is in relation to their percentage of free school meal entitlement. The rationale behind offering the free fruit the free school fruit as a saving, that was easy for me to say, as a saving, is based on the fact that we are moving towards free school meal entitlement for all of children in our primary schools, and free fruit is part of the daily offer. Our free school meals are nutritionally balanced, and free fruit is available as part of these school meals every day for every child. So that was the rationale behind that. The storage of Asn Materials, we had previously set aside funding hoping to source somewhere to store, and it's bigger Asn equipment is probably how I would put it. I'm sure Audrey's on the call and can be more specific than that. But we were looking to have a shared storage facility with colleagues in Dundee, and unfortunately that didn't come to fruition. We have found alternative storage locally, so this money was excess money in our budget that we felt quite safe to offer up as a saving towards the wider corporate savings. And in relation to our SPSAs in school, it is true we pay them at LG4. It is low. I had a meeting with Audrey Osborne last week because, as elected members will be aware, we have been in receipt of quite significant additional funding for school staff, and that includes support staff. And one of the things that I've asked Audrey to look at with our colleagues in finance is the number of school support staff that we currently employ. what the cost is based on their current salary and what the cost might be if that salary were to increase. Now, this would obviously affect the number of SPSAs, but we are beginning to look at that work because I agree. And it causes us some issue with recruitment at times because our neighbours pay more. So when neighbours are advertising, sometimes we lose some of our very skilled staff and staff who have built up good relationships in our own schools. So it is something that we are concerned about and we are looking to address. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Devine, is that?
Yeah, I actually thought perhaps it was the rationale about the fruit was about free school meals. So that's fine. I'm glad to hear that you're looking at SPSAs because having worked with many in my time, they are invaluable members of staff. And you're right, we can easily lose them to neighbours if we don't pay the right salary. Thank you.
Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Deputy Convener, I think that Councillor Speed was ahead of me.
Sorry, Vice Convener, it was Councillor Whiteside.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Vice Convener.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was just wanting to mention item 5.6, the differential in funding in school meals, and I completely understand that there's saving to be made there given the current uptake. I just thought it was worth articulating our ambition to keep trying to increase uptake because it's hugely important. So I didn't want this to appear as if we were being grateful for the low uptake. We certainly need to work on increasing that going forward. Thanks.
Councillor Speed.
Yeah. Thanks, Deputy Convener. Yeah, I think queries have already been picked up or answered previous to the meeting. But for me, budget efficiencies is the main theme within this report. So I'm just wondering if you can please clarify what efficiencies are related to the areas of multiple deprivation and what impact this will actually have. Like I say, I know that you've touched on a few areas already, but just for some more detail, please.
Mrs. McIntosh.
Thanks, Councillor Speed. Obviously, the removal of the free fruit may be said to affect those children living in deprivation and their nutritional uptake. I think I've already explained that if these families were to take up the free school meal offer, and we are working very hard, just reverting back to what Councillor Whiteside said, we are working very hard to increase the uptake. We would like to see it as high as possible, and there's a lot of service design work going on at the moment. We hope that the reduction of the mitigations in COVID will actually just naturally see an increase as we move back to having dining areas like they used to be. In terms of how the budget efficiencies affect people living in deprivation, I think that, well, I know that myself and my officers and our colleagues in finance and our leaders in schools have worked very hard to put this report together and to offer budget efficiencies that we think will have the least impact on children and young people in our schools. The savings are largely derived from the natural savings between what we pay support staff and the money that was provided by the government. There is a natural saving that will occur from some of the money given by the government for permanent staffing because we won't take these staff on until August in the new school year. The other savings are savings that we think that we can safely make with the least amount of impact. And the only saving in that list that directly impacts on staffing in our schools is the reference to the 1% reduction in the secondary DSM. Myself and Jim Hammond have met with our secondary head teacher colleagues to fully discuss this, and we believe that this saving will have absolutely minimal impact. Of course, sitting here as the Director of Education, I wouldn't want to give you any money out of our budget. We've taken all of the money that the government and the council could throw at us and trying to use it as best we can. But I can assure you that our school leaders are not only leaders in their own schools, but they see themselves as senior officers of the council, and they have taken into consideration the whole council situation in respect of delivering a balanced budget, and have given this very careful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Mrs. McIntosh.
Now, Councillor McMillan Douglas.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. I would like to ask the Director, please, to confirm or not confirm the very clear statements in the very clear report. Paragraph 7.1 says the savings are necessary because of the real term reduction in government grant funding. So that is the driver, and that's quite clear from the paper. And then in paragraph 5.1.1, all of the savings proposals are achievable with limited impact on the learning outcomes of children and young people. Could the Director confirm those two extremely important statements?
Yes, and thanks for that, Councillor McMillan Douglas. And I think what's very important to note is, although there has been a reduction in the core budget, corporately and nationally, offered to local authorities, education has really benefited from increased funding. So even with that 1% reduction in the secondary DSM that I just mentioned, our school staffing situation is better off than it was pre-COVID because of the additional funding that the government gave us. First of all, for temporary members of staff, and then the first pot of funding that came in August of this school session for permanent staff, and a second pot of funding for more permanent staff that comes into play from April the 1st. So whilst there has been a reduction, education nationally has benefited, and I don't see there being any reduction to the service that we offer. In fact, my next job is to work with my officers and our school leaders to look at that second pot of additional funding. The Scottish Attainment Challenge funding, which Angus Council will receive for the first time, we will receive just over £200,000 in year one, and that raises to over £800,000 a year by year 4. So that's funding that only specific local authorities got up until this point, and now every local authority in Scotland will gain some funding, and the new allocation of PEF funding. And our school leaders are very keen to work together to look as to how best we use that. And when I say best, I mean in terms of best value. They know that maybe not everybody will get a share of it. We'll look at the data that we have and apportion that money to projects that we think will make the biggest difference for those most in need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Convener, thank you to the Director. Very clear. Thank you.
Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, Convener. One of the best parts over the last 5 years of being an Angus councillor has been the school visits that I've been able to enjoy. And of course, I've not been able to do that for the last 2 years now. And I've missed that greatly. While I suppose as councillors, we're here to look after the policy and strategic side and not interfere in operational things, we do need to know what's going on in the operational side, and visiting schools was a great way of keeping up to date and bringing the papers we see before us to life. So I'm really looking forward to getting back to them. And my question is entirely operational, and it goes back to Councillor Devine's question about the ASN. And you said it was storage for the larger ASN materials, and I'm just wondering what exactly they are. Or not exactly, but if you could give us a flavour of it, please.
Thanks, Councillor Brazen. I'm going to ask Audrey Osborne to come in because that is definitely more her area of expertise than mine. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly, and thank you, Councillor Brace. So we're talking about large ASN equipment. We're talking about plinths for personal care and support. We're talking about Heathfield chairs, to aid mobility for children and young people who have mobility issues. So big pieces of equipment that are quite difficult to store in schools, or standing frames, etc. So sometimes children need them for a set period, and then they need bigger bits of equipment. So we take that equipment back and we need somewhere to store that. We had looked at having a joint equipment store with Dundee that already exists for adult services. Unfortunately, the storage that they had wasn't sufficient, and it was going to have to pay for a container on their site. So that didn't make sense to us. So we've found a local solution to that, so that we can have our equipment stored. It's not just about storing the equipment, it's also about having a process for cleaning and allocating and transporting. So it makes sense that that's more local. But the attempt to join with a Dundee store was so that we would be able to look at a wider range of equipment. So if we didn't have a piece of equipment, rather than having to buy it, maybe Dundee had it and we could use theirs, or vice versa. Maybe we have some equipment. So it was an attempt to pay now, to save later. But unfortunately, that's not been able to happen. But we have a local solution that is for those larger pieces of equipment that our children and young people need in schools.
Yes, well, thank you very much for that. I know a bit more about it now, and yeah, extremely important that you have the storage you need so that you can get the stuff to be used.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Could I ask Councillor Macmillan Douglas and Councillor Braze to put down their hands?
Ah, yes.
Thank you. And now there's another hand which I'm not coming up on my screen, but
Bob Miles here.
yeah. Okay, on you go, Bob.
Thank you. There's been a few comments about the low uptake in school meals, especially free school meals. Tayside Contracts, who supply them, are also very aware of this. And only yesterday did they have an open meeting with suppliers and local producers to try and increase the local produce in the school meals. And also there were the Royal Highland Educational Trust, who runs Angus Countryside Initiative, who also tries to educate the kids about what they are actually eating. And by doing this, we're trying to and hoping to increase the uptake of school meals, one, by providing local nutritional food, and two, letting people know where it comes from and how it gets there. So a lot is being done in that. So just to inform members of the committee that weren't otherwise aware. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. I see another hand up. That's maybe yours, Councillor Miles, is it?
No, mine's down.
It's Councillor Boyd.
Councillor Boyd.
Sorry, it was just to give my apologies. I had a little bit of a personal crisis going on, so I've only managed to join the meeting in the last 5 minutes, but I wanted to give my apologies for my lateness. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Councillor Boyd. Okay, if there's no more questions, are we agreeing the recommendations?
Agreed.
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 Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
Well, that seems to be our meeting. Sarah will keep me right if it's not.
Vice Convener, I believe the recommendations have been agreed, and that's the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all again for your attendance, and best wishes to you all in whatever you're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
convener.